So I want to get started by just kind of recapping this year for DPI. Obviously, Governor Evers dubbed this year the Year of the Kid. How has DPI held that title?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're always about kids. I mean, that's the Department of Public Instruction. We're here for kids in school districts and communities, public libraries. But it's been a challenging year, despite the Year of the Kid. I mean, there's been a lot of uncertainty and challenges, with the federal government in particular. But what we're doing is we control what we can control. And so we've been implementing elements of our strategic plan which have focused on kids, such as mental health, teacher recruitment and retention, but also the Act 20 literacy programs too.
And I want to talk about one of the bigger headlines that came out that you were criticized for this year, which was that Capital Times article that was a year-long investigation. It kind of put your department under fire for the way that it handles sexual abuse and grooming allegations in schools. You've defended DPI during multiple videos, during Senate committees, things like that, saying that you followed state statute when investigating these incidents. As you reflect back on this now, do you still feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, what I would say right now is that that headline was completely false. Our job is to investigate, any allegations of misconduct and with teachers. That's our job. And I'm proud of the work that we do at the DPI. I mean, we're very thorough. We, use the information that we are given to make sure that we are not putting any child in harm's way. And again, I'm proud of the work that our agency does. And so I felt that that was not fair, those allegations towards us. I will defend the DPI because as a mom and as a superintendent, as a lifelong educator, I mean, there's nothing more important to me than making sure that kids are protected.
And so would you still call for a correction for the Cap Times today?
100%, absolutely. I feel that that was irresponsible because the headline that they had actually undermined the systems that are meant to protect kids. I mean, that is our charge. And when we are sowing distrust in the systems that are meant to protect kids, I feel that that was wrong.
And I want to ask too, because one of the things that struck me from that investigation was the staff dedicated to handling these incidents. It's one full-time, one part-time, albeit it does have the support of legal counsel, but is that enough staff to deal with these investigations?
We do what we can with the resources that we have. Of course, I would love to have more staff, but with the staff that we have, we are thorough and we use the information that we are presented to conduct these investigations in a timely manner. Of course, more would be helpful, but it's also we work on the speed of which we receive information, and there's a lot of going back and forth to get information from investigations. So it does take time. So if we had more staff, yes, we could probably get through some more, at a different pace.
As you look to 2026, is there an effort to bolster staff or hire more?
Well, we wish we could. We wish we had more resources. We get our funding from the state of Wisconsin. And so if we were to get more staff, we'd have to get more funding from the state of Wisconsin to do so.
And you talked about the public trust coming from that article, but do you feel that there's been an impact to public trust in your department after this?
I hope not. I think, we stand on our record. I think people know that the work that we do, we have integrity in what we do and that we are here for kids. And we've done a lot to be proactive in how we have, removed people from the classroom who have been accused of educator misconduct. So it's really, I feel that when you have these entities attacking the systems that are meant to protect kids, that's the part that's really harmful.
So are you doing anything in particular to rebuild any public trust that you lost after this?
Well, I mean, what we do is we just constantly will, do our job. I mean, we're effective and we are efficient. The people who do the work are good people. And so we just continue to do the work, and that is to protect kids.
And I also remember when this was kind of unfolding, you also called some lawmakers and some folks running for governor, their reactions to this a political stunt. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of simplifying here. Yeah. Do you still stand by that statement?
Yeah, I do, because anytime you politicize this, it's not helpful. Protecting kids and making sure that we have every kid safe in their classrooms, that shouldn't be political. Public education shouldn't be political, but that's what people do. I mean, they're going to try to find ways to politicize, the work that we do, because public education is something that everybody cares about.
But after this, we did see you roll out things like a new database, and there were changes that were made. So is there an argument, so to speak, that the publicity that this got and the public scrutiny did make some good changes for the department.
To that effect, I mean, we have always been transparent. So all the information that we've put in this database, it's really just a website that takes information that was already publicly available and reorganized it so that it's a little bit easier, I suppose, for people to find the information. So, I mean, we had also put in effect before the article, we had already been promulgating rules to look at teacher conduct and a code of ethics for teachers. So that was already in the works well before this article. So I guess really in some ways it may have sped up some of the things that were already in process, but in the end of the day, or at the end of the day, we have always been transparent about educator misconduct through our online licensing database. People can look up an educator, any educator in the state of Wisconsin who has a DPI license and find that information.
And I remember during that press conference, you mentioned that you're trying to also implement the reasons why some licenses may have been revoked. Sure. Where does that stand now? Is that something that we could see next year?
Yeah, it is. The thing is, it's very labor intensive, and when you don't have a lot of staff who can, you can devote to this work because we have them, doing other work, we have to go through paper records because we're going all the way back to even before we had electronic records. So we will, add them as we get through the work. Right now, it is transparent where you can look up the person and it'll say revoked, or whatever the reason is that they don't have a license. But you're right, we will be adding more transparency and reasons, but that's just, as we get through them, we will add it.
And this article also said that these issues, as it called out, were before your administration as well. It talked about Governor Evers' time as superintendent. Have you talked to him at all about this and how to address it or move forward?
Well, I mean, there's always been, cases of educator misconduct, before me, before, Governor Evers when he was superintendent, all the way back. So, I mean, we're going all the way back. And even during his term, there were attempts to strengthen the laws around it. And that is something that law enforcement has asked us to do, or not asked us, but asked the state legislature to do, is define grooming. Because if we can define it, then we're able to make sure that we're very accurate in making sure that we're getting these individuals out of classrooms. The other thing, though, that law enforcement said, though, is that grooming is not just something that happens in schools. It's a societal issue. It is not just a school issue. And so I feel, in some ways, people are attacking public schools for an issue that is prevalent in society. And so if we want to eradicate that, we need to really focus on the laws.
Have you talked to Evers about that?
It's been part of the conversations our offices have been having, yes.
And so I kind of want to move now to some other things in the state legislature. During the last Senate floor session, we saw a vote to undo Governor Evers' partial veto that would lock in school funding for 400 years. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what that veto actually did. Really, the veto gave school districts the authority to levy more money. And so what happened is that a lot of people saw an increase in their tax bills this tax season in December. And school finance is really complicated in the fact that it shouldn't be, but it is the partnership between state and local governments. And the state government hasn't given us, the state legislature, which the majority party has been in power now for the past 15 years, has given us very small increases in our school districts. And so what that 450-year veto did was just give school districts the ability to, be able to raise their levy. And so when we didn't get any funding, not just this year in the budget, but also next year in the budget, schools have no other options in order to generate revenue than to raise their levy. And that's what that veto allowed them to do. Not every school district can do it, or not every school district chose to do it. Some go to referendum instead, but it just gave school districts flexibility.
Have you talked with anyone in the legislature about trying to end that veto? Have you been an advocate on either side of it?
Well, my advocacy is really around school funding. I mean, I would ask our state legislature, why didn't they give us any funding? And so what we see is now taxpayers, local property taxpayers, having to stretch their budgets even further. The state legislature's obligation is to fund our public schools. They had traditionally, up until around 15 years ago, provided 2/3 funding. You've probably heard that before. So 2/3 of our funding in our school districts came from the state, and then the other third came from local. But back in 2011-13, or actually with the budget repair bill that happened 15 years ago, they broke that promise. And in addition to breaking that promise and not giving schools inflationary increases, the legislature has added more overhead. We're funding voucher schools and private school choice. And we had not been doing that to the extent that we are now. So when school districts aren't getting money and they have to ask their local taxpayers to do it, it's because the state isn't providing that increase, but the state is also funding another school system on top of that.
What do your conversations look like behind closed doors with, let's say, Republican lawmakers in the legislature?
Yeah, we need to fix the formula. Back in 2018, there was a Blue Ribbon Commission on school finance, and it was a bipartisan commission, and it was led by really great experts, people who are in the legislature who had served on school boards, who had been around school finance. We had school finance experts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and advocates throughout the state who were part of this. And they made recommendations, and those are the recommendations that we still stand by. We have to fix the formula. We can't continue to rely on the system we have right now because schools can't do it and local property taxpayers can't sustain it.
And are lawmakers receptive to that message?
Well, I would wish they were, but when you look at the fact that they gave 0 increase this year, and also we're not getting another increase next year because it's a 2-year budget, I think the question still stands whether or not they are.
And another piece of legislation we saw come through this year that I want to get your take on is this school consolidation package of bills that looks to incentivize school districts to consolidate as we're seeing a decline in enrollment in schools. What is your take on legislation like that?
Yeah, it's an option, right? I think school districts need options. When you look at enrollment in the state of Wisconsin, our birth rates, but everything's declining. Like, we don't have as many kids as we had 60 years ago when reorganization of our school districts were last looked at. And so school districts need options. When you look at different parts of the state that are growing at a much more rapid pace than other parts of the state, I think the nice thing about this legislation was that it asked for funding for a study. And so it allows school districts to get the information needed so that they can make those decisions if it's best for their community.
So you're not opposed to it?
I'm not opposed to it. I think more information and transparency is better. And when you look, again, at population changes in the state, it's part of progress. Things change. But the piece that I liked about it was it allowed school districts to get the information through a study and be able to make those decisions locally.
And I want to move now to stuff that your department did this year specifically. One of those was changing, and I'm simplifying here, the way that you score districts and schools across our state. Some critics said that that was difficult because it didn't allow districts and schools to compare from years previous to this year. Do you still feel like changing it was the best thing to do for?
So, are you talking about the report cards, or are you talking about the the school district report cards?
Yes.
Yes. So the school district report cards, again, were put into place by the state legislature, the one that's in the majority power currently, and it was looking at different metrics. There are a lot of things: attendance, achievement, participation in tests, those kinds of things, and it's like a GPS. If you have a GPS or even your phone, you have to update the apps every so often. And what this did was just recalibrated the data to make sure that we are actually using the correct metrics. And we had educators throughout the state look at this, and it was a very unanimous consensus when it came to making sure that we were updating. And it adjusted the edges by like a point or a percentage each. It was like what you would expect when you look at any kind of growth or if you look at any kind of metric.
So it sounds like you're kind of calling it a common sense update.
It is, and it was, again, it's just part of business, right? You have to update, how you evaluate and score things.
Do you think there is a challenge there for having districts and schools have a harder time comparing?
I really don't think so. It's not like these were wild swings. It was just, year to year, a percent here, a percent there. And we also used a national organization on evaluation to come in and facilitate the conversation. So really, I think, again, here's another example of let's try to politicize something. What we were doing was in the best interest of our schools, making sure that they had the most up-to-date data so that they can identify areas that they can improve. But you're always going to find people who want to politicize that and knock public schools down.
And I want to move to 2026 and talk a little bit about what are priorities or initiatives that you would like to see DPI take on next year.
Yeah, I'm really excited, of course. It's 2026, and it's kind of that excitement when you start a new school year or you start any kind of year. But our goals are going to be about continuing to implement our strategic plan. So a couple years ago, we did listening sessions throughout the state. And we had communities identify what is it that you want us to focus on at the DPI, and they focused on, being innovative in education, educator recruitment and retention, mental health, modernizing the DPI, and so we're going to continue on those paths. And there's of course these little inroads in between there of things that we will continue to do, like literacy and implement the literacy law. But it's really exciting because when you think about modernizing and you think about innovation, it's a really important time to do that.
Is there any specific initiative or program going in next year that you are specifically excited about?
Well, I'm always excited about literacy and learning, and I'm excited that we finally got the funding for it so that we can implement new coaching models and curriculum and really help our school districts help kids learn.
Wonderful. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
And then I just like to open it up at the end if there's anything we didn't touch on really quickly that you wanted to go ahead and add.
There's always going to be challenges, and I guess I would just hope that people wouldn't politicize public education, because at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want healthy kids and happy kids. We want strong teachers and strong communities, and really public education is for all of us. And if we want our democracy to thrive, we have to make sure our public schools survive.